Hey guys, welcome to Polished Timber. As the title says, I'm trying out my first coffee table made of epoxy. I've never built a table like this before and I really didn't know what to expect of it. I started with this slab right here, which is a root of a European walnut, and my first challenge was the fact that I really didn't know how to split it in half. I had to find someone with a milling saw because I had no way of splitting this in half, and fortunately for me I found someone really close and they split it up for me. I wasn't planning to make a YouTube video out of this, so at the beginning I really didn't film that much. All the videos that I have were just for family, but afterwards I decided to make a YouTube video out of it and I started filming way more, and you'll see later in much more detail what I did and how I built it. Because I didn't have a big enough saw, I decided to go to my local box store and buy some melamine so they can cut up some pieces for me so I can build my form for the table. As you can see, the only saw I had was a construction saw, which was cordless, and it was pretty much gutless. It got the job done though, so I'm not really complaining. But I'm also not really happy about it because I couldn't really do anything with it. You'll see when I'll cut up the walnut, it's gonna struggle a lot. What I'm trying to do here is find a way to cut my pieces because I don't have any bench and I don't really have anything suited to do this kind of work. So I found a box which I had lying around in the garage, and I'm trying to level everything up and make the box and the saw at the same level so I can push my pieces there in order to cut everything as I need it. As this is just a test table, I really want to build more tables like this, and you'll see in future videos that I will. I tried to do as much work as I could with what I had, but it wasn't enough, so you'll see in my future videos that I did buy a good saw, a good table saw, and I bought a lot of other cool tools. In the next video, I think you'll see how I built everything. I'll change everything in the garage and I'll try to build a new workshop out of my garage in order to make a lot of tables like this. I really enjoyed doing this, so I really want to continue and do more and more of these kind of tables. I'm trying to figure out here which is the best position for each of the pieces, and then I'll just take my level and some chalk and mark everything up so I can cut it up later. Now comes the really fun part, because even though the slab is only about 6 centimeters thick, this saw is really underpowered, and you'll see that it's so hard for it to cut up that piece. It keeps bogging up, it keeps stopping because the force needed is just too much for it. And this is the point where I decided that this saw isn't really what I need. I need a bigger saw, I need a better saw. And I think after I finished this, the first thing I did was just go online and order a new table saw, because this is just useless for me. If you look into the background within this video, you'll see the saw appearing, you'll see new tools appearing, and even at the end I think I'll be using different tools, because I decided that I really need new tools. I didn't have enough, so I didn't really expect to have the need of better tools until I started this. As you can see, at one point it even started smoking up, so I was really concerned about this, but I had to keep plowing on because it would take days, if not weeks, for the table saw to come in. So I just wanted to move on and do this project. Even now when I do the voiceover for the video, I'm looking at the playback and it frustrates me a lot to see how much it did bog down, and I sped this thing up a little bit and it's still frustrating because it just kept bogging up and kept smoking. It wasn't really a good saw to do what I did with it, and you live and you learn. Finally, now that I have all the pieces cut up, well, not all pieces because I still have one more to cut up, but it's just small parts out of it, I can mock everything up and see how the table will look like. I'll chalk a little bit more for another piece, and then I'll cut it up and see how everything looks. After I cut everything up, I didn't like the fact that I had a lot of empty space on two sides, well, on one side and a corner. So I took a few more little pieces, cut them up to fit everything that I needed, and I've put them there so everything is more filled with wood rather than have empty spaces only with resin. From watching videos online on how to build these kind of tables, I saw that you need to take off the bark. The thing is that I think everybody likes the contrast with the bark on, but from everything that I looked at, it seems that that's a weak point, and if you leave the bark on, you risk having the table split exactly at that point. To be honest, deep inside I really wanted to keep that bark because it gives character to the table, but I also want to use this table, so I didn't really want it to split up in 2 months. After getting all the bark off, I also needed to clean up those margins. So I tried different grinding wheels. Some worked better than others, and I finally got into the gray one. I really don't know what material it's made from. It just works best. So I think in the next few tables I used that one. Cleaning all these pieces up made me realize how much I need some dust collection, because doing everything like this is just a recipe for disaster. I really like my lungs, so I really want them to be clean. And after this, I went again on the internet and bought a dust collection system, and I'll be using this a little bit later when I'm gonna be finishing the table. And it's way better not to inhale that dust. I did use a mask here, but it didn't really help a lot as I'm in an enclosed space. You kind of get to breathe that stuff when you take your mask off, and it's really uncomfortable to have it on. As I said earlier, I didn't really like the fact that the wood was cut square as it was a root, and I decided to make it a little bit rounder. So I've drawn some lines for me to have as a guide. I tried to follow the natural grain of the wood, so it looks a little bit better, and then I use the grinding wheel to finish everything up to make it look as natural as possible. This pendular saw didn't really have a good blade, and the saw itself isn't really a good one, so I struggled with this too. But as I said earlier, you work with what you've got. It kinda did its job, but I'm never gonna do this again like this. Most probably I'll just cut everything square on the saw, on the big table saw, and then I'll just round everything over with the grinding wheel. I did buy some new grinding wheel discs for wood, and I'm gonna be using those from now on rather than using this pendular saw. It's not really worth struggling with this tool. I really like the way it turned out. To be honest, I wasn't expecting to look this good. Maybe I could have done a little better job of making everything a little bit rounder. On the finished table, if you look closely, you'll see some straight lines, which I don't really love. But to be honest, I think it went really well. Rather than having square parts, at least you have something rounded and it looks a lot better. After everything was cleaned up, I decided that I need to seal the faces and the edges of the wood, because I'm going to be using black epoxy. I didn't want to stain the wood. I want it to be as natural as possible, and this is why I'm sealing everything up. I don't do it for all my tables now that I did a few of them, but I did learn how to do this, so I got that for a plus. It's not a big deal to do this, it's just time consuming because you seal it up, and I didn't have fast drying epoxy. I had to seal it up and then wait for 24 to 48 hours for it to harden, and only after that I was able to put everything into the form and do the pour. While I waited for the epoxy to dry, I decided it's time to build the form itself. Now that I have all the pieces, I could put up the margins for it so I can start pouring everything into the form. Besides caulking the table, I also screwed everything over because I really didn't want my epoxy to leak on the floor. At the time of this recording, I think I've built about 3 or 4 tables and none of them leaked in any way, and I'm really proud of this because if you look on YouTube on other people's tables, every now and then you'll see someone complaining that it leaked. I didn't get that yet. Hopefully I will never will, but if I do, at least I know how to seal everything up even though the epoxy is pouring out of it. Funny thing is that, as you can see, the box I'm building my form on is really the box for my table saw. So at this point I already have my table saw, which is really cool because I could have used it to cut everything up. But hey, I have it now, I can use it. You'll see the video how I built it, how I made everything square, how I made everything plane, how I made everything parallel to each other, and I'm really proud of that saw. It's not a really expensive saw, it's not a SawStop or any other brand, it's a German brand, but it's really good. I really like it, and it has a lot going for it. Keep an eye out for the video when I put it up, because it's a really nice video. I get a little bit more comfortable with the camera. I talk to the camera rather than just doing my work. It's a little bit hard when you're trying to learn new things and have to speak to the camera. So I think this video is better suited for me to be able to learn how to build an epoxy table and then get comfortable with the camera, get comfortable with talking to it and doing all the camera stuff, which I really didn't have to do here. I just minded my own business. I did the table, it went great, it looks amazing. Wait till the end till you see it, and that's what I wanted to achieve, more or less. Being my first table, I obviously went overkill with this. So, as I said, I really didn't want this to leak in any way. When I built the form, beside the fact that I caulked it, I did also put in Tyvek tape. I was really 100% sure that it wouldn't leak in any way. On my next tables, I didn't really use it anymore because it's kind of expensive, and I found out that if you caulk it well, then you won't have any issues when it comes to leakage. Hopefully I won't get to regret these words, but up until now, all the forms that I did, I used a very good caulk, and it seems to be working fine, and I'll keep using this rather than paying a lot of money on the Tyvek tape. Anyway, now that I finished the form, I'm mocking all the pieces up and I'm fixing them to the form with clamps because wood usually floats within epoxy. So I fix everything up so I can get ready to pour. If you look into the background, you'll also see my shiny new table saw, which I really enjoy. It's really important to have everything clamped really tight, because you don't really want those pieces moving after you've poured your epoxy, or it will basically ruin all your work. I decided to take my time with this and fixed all the pieces very well, and in this case everything went fine. I did mention earlier that I was gonna make this epoxy black, and as you can see I'm putting in dye, so I make everything black. I think I went a little bit overboard. I wanted a little bit of transparency within the table, but you live and you learn, right? As a note here, I didn't pour everything in one pour because I was afraid it was gonna get too hot and ruin everything, even though this epoxy I'm using from Epoxy says its working thickness is up to 5 centimeters. That's about 2 inches. I'm still a little bit stressed about this, and I did it in 2 pours. I poured about half first time, then I waited for about a day, and then poured the second time. You'll see that on the second pour some wrinkles will appear. That's because the epoxy is not really hardened yet. This kind of epoxy is thick at about 24 hours and hard at about 48 hours and fully cured in about 3 weeks. I am trying to pour in every nook and cranny because this being a root, it has a lot of crevices, small crevices, which I need to fill up. Otherwise, I'll have voids and have a lot of work with CA glue later. So you'll see me go with small amounts just on the top, wait for them to seep in, and only after that I'm gonna level everything off and go with a spatula to make everything smooth. I'm just gonna shut up for about a minute so you guys can see the pour, because everybody likes to see that. I also use a heat gun in order to pop any bubbles that appear, and fortunately for me in this case I didn't really have that many bubbles, but I think this is something with this epoxy. I'm not sponsored by them in any way, I just bought it off the shelf, but it's a really good epoxy. It doesn't really do any bubbles, and even if it does, they're small and you don't really have issues with them. You can pop them very easily, and they don't tend to come up after about 5-10 minutes. I did do an experiment on a thicker pour, and in that case you do get bubbles coming up at about 24 hours, but I don't think I will ever do pours like this at 5 centimeters. I'd rather wait 24 hours. Maybe on clear epoxy, because in that case you have issues with bubbles appearing up where the 2 layers of epoxy bond. So maybe in that case I will be doing 1 thick pour, but I really have to test this out because I really don't know. I'm at the beginning, I'm still learning, and without trying it out I don't really know what's going to happen. Another thing you'll see me do right now is the fact that I won't fill up the form because the slab is too thick and I really want to plane it down. It's at about 6 centimeters as I said, and I wanted the table to be at about 4.5 centimeters. That's almost 2 inches, so I didn't want to have anything thicker than that because it's just a small coffee table and it's not really worth having something that thick. It's really hard not having the necessary tools to do everything that you want, because you'll see a little bit later that I'm gonna struggle a lot when it comes to planing this thing, because I don't really have anything to work with when doing this. I did build a planing jig, which I do have a video on the works on it, but the planing jig has two variants because the first variant was having too much flex in it and I really didn't enjoy it. In this case, for this table, you'll see I just built a simple planing jig from melamine and I'm planing it with that. The thing is with this is that I have to shave off about 7/8 of an inch, which is a whole lot for wood, and as I said, I'm gonna struggle a lot with it. You'll see in a bit. Right here, I'm trying to fill up all the crevices, as I said earlier, because it's really important to have everything filled and not have empty spaces, because those empty spaces you either have to fill them up with CA glue or you have to put in fast drying epoxy, which I didn't have access to. I don't really know where to find fast drying epoxy other than small tubes like 10 milliliters, 20 milliliters, and that's really expensive here. So I'll keep looking, I'll find some variants and see what I can do with it. But for now, it's really important for me to fill up everything so I don't have to work a lot harder later in the process. Now, as you can see, the epoxy has dried up. It's hard as a rock. I think it's been about 4 or 5 days since I've poured it. So I'm trying now to see if my planing jig works and if it does its job. You'll see in a little bit that things go a little bit south because the router that I have is an old router, is a cheap router, and it doesn't hold the bits very well. And you'll see that I'll have a slip up and this will cost me a lot, not in money but in time, because I only had one planing bit which was wide enough, so I had to keep working on it, and I ended up using a 1/2 inch bit to plane one side of the table until I got the second one delivered to me and I was able to use it. You'll see in a second. The bit that I'm using right now is a 2-inch bit, which is more than wide enough to do its job, and I really enjoyed working with it. But as I said, I smashed it to smithereens like on my second or third pass, and I was so bummed about it, but there was nothing I could do about it. I could just move on, and from now on I know better to have at least 2 of each bit, so if one breaks I can use another, and until I break that one I can order yet another one to have as a reserve. It's really important to have your tools accessible to you, otherwise you'll just be standing and looking at your table. I do have the same issue right now because I'm currently working on another table, on another small table, but as I said, my planing jig wasn't really good enough because I'm trying to build bigger and bigger tables. I have one bigger table that I'm working on right now, and I can't plane it with this jig that I have right now, and I had to build one from scratch with CNC components. And right now I'm just stuck waiting for a spindle in order to move forward with my projects, because I can't use any other jig with this. This is how I learn, this is how I do my work. If you have any other ideas, leave it down in the comments. Maybe you can help me with how to organize myself a little bit better and how to do everything a little bit better. I finally demolded this table, and I think it was one of the best feelings I ever had to see the table out of the mold intact. I didn't have any bubbles, I didn't have any issues with it, it didn't stick to the form as you saw. It's really great, and I felt accomplishment. The issue that I'm having right now is the fact that I have way too much wood sticking out of the resin and I need to plane it down, and as you can see it's about an inch high, which isn't a really big deal if you have the right tools, but I don't, so that's that. You'll see right now that my bit will go up in smokes. I'll just let you look at it and draw your conclusions. One bit down, peoples. What can you do? You can just get the next bit that you have, which, as I said, is a half an inch bit, and continue work, because there's no other thing I could do about it. There's no really good way of doing this without having a good planer or access to some sort of a machine that can cut up everything that you need here. So as you see, I'm trying to plane this with a electric planer. I'm trying with my jig, and finally I decided to go with the jig because it's just the best way to go about it. If I remember correctly, with the half-inch bit, I think it took about 4 hours for me to plane one side of the table, and I just gave up and waited for another day or two until I got a new bit, a new 2-inch bit, and you'll see in a few seconds how fast that moves, how fast that works, and I could do my job easily without having to stress myself out hard. What's interesting for me while building these tables is how much I learn each time I put one tool in my hands. I just learn so much by doing this stuff that it's unbelievable to me. From each experience that I had building this table, I learned something new, and I decided to do something new and to buy a new tool or to approach things a little bit differently. At this point, as you can see, I just screwed 2 boards of melamine onto the working table that I created. It was just one cabinet that I had in the garage. I slapped in another melamine as a plain surface, and then I screwed in the boards, and this way I had the planing jig correctly created. Of course, everything's plumb, so I don't have any issues with differences in thickness when the table is finished. But as I said, it's really important for me to try these things out, because if I try them out, I find out what's wrong, I find out how I can build a new, better jig, and you'll see in the video where I'm gonna create the planing jig, the final planing jig that I have, how much trial and error goes into this, but at the end I have a really nice table and a really nice jig. Finally, I have the new bit arrive, and as you can see, everything is much smoother and goes much faster. So I'll just let you see how fast everything goes when you have the right tools. At this point I do have my extraction system in the corner there, but I can't really use it because I don't have a really good way of putting in a tube to extract everything, so I decided not to use it at this point. But with my final jig, which I use for planing, I will have the tube attached to it, so I have good extraction and avoid the whole mess that you're seeing right here, because I didn't really like vacuuming out all those chips. I also didn't really enjoy the smell of burnt epoxy. It's really hard on you, so I prefer not to do that anymore. You'll see it in the video where I build the jig. Never in my life have I done such a messy job. But yeah, it's plain, it's nice. Now we need to fix all the gaps, all the holes, fill them up and start sanding this. Let's do that. I got a little bit carried away there. Before I could start sanding this, I needed to fill out all the pinholes that were in the table, and only after that I would start sanding. I was excited, and for good reason, because the thing that you just saw there took about 2 days with the small bit, and I was so happy I was done with it, with the big bit, that I couldn't contain my happiness and I couldn't think straight. I wanted just to have it done and be able to sand it and see the final product. But there's still a little bit of a way to go, because sanding, as I get to figure out, is a bit of a process and takes a while, so I had to do that too. I'm just gonna let you watch this part here, which is a very small part, which is very satisfying, because as you can see, there are a lot of circles left behind by the planing bit, and it's so satisfying to see that those things disappear. I was a little bit stressed out about it because I thought they wouldn't clear out and I would have to sand way more than I did. I did sand a lot, but it did clear up easier than I thought. Even though you see me do small strokes here, the final table doesn't have any waves on it, so it's really smooth to the touch. But I did really need to go through this with really small strokes because I wanted to see if it clears up or not. I did do a good job of it, and I think it went better and easier than I thought. As you can see, I did buy in the meantime a track saw because I found out that I really need one. There isn't really a good way of having the table square without the track saw, and I sucked it up and spent up the money for it. I couldn't afford a Festool or another big brand, so I bought something from the local box store. It's not the worst, but I did look up a few videos on YouTube on what to look over when you want to buy a track saw, and the only thing that came up over and over again was the fact that it's really not important to have a specific brand. What's really important is to have a track saw that cuts really square. So I went to the box store, I checked everything out, and I felt like this one was cutting as square as possible. And as you can see here, I did put a machinist square after I did the cut, just to make sure that everything's square, everything's good. And it is. I'm really pleased with the tool I got. Most probably I'll buy another one later in the process if I can afford one, but at this point it does its job perfectly. I did about 4 tables with it, and each and every time it's really good. Anyway, as you can see, I finished sanding and now I'm polishing up the table. It looks amazing. I'm really not happy about the polish compound that I got. It's still from Epoxy. I tried that out and I really wasn't satisfied with it. I did buy for my future tables the 3M kind because I saw on YouTube again that that's one of the best compounds that you could get to do polishing on tables. So I got a few 100 grams of it. I'll show you on my next table how it turns out, but it's really good. Unfortunately, I'm not really a good polisher, but the difference between this compound and the one that 3M offers is really huge. After polishing, I just put in some beeswax so it protects the wood a little bit better. And after that, I just put in some nano coating, which I think I forgot to record. The only thing that I really need to do right now is to fit in some good legs. These are just some simple metal legs, which I'm gonna mount in a minute. But before that, I need to finish applying that wax. This is the finished tabletop. All that I need to do is, as I said, put in the legs. But first, let's watch how it turned out. I really love it. I really enjoy it. Hopefully you guys like it at least half as much as I do. The legs, as you can see, are just simple ones. I really liked the way how they looked, and I think it was a great choice. They look really cool with the tabletop that I created. I don't think I could have got any better legs than these. Maybe if I would have created some out of wood, but I don't really have the experience right now to build something like that. Maybe in future projects, and maybe you guys can offer me some insights and some tips and tricks on how to build wooden legs for tables. I don't know, I'm just leaving this out there. Comment down below and I'll gladly read it. That's it, guys. Hopefully you liked the table. I really enjoyed building it. If you liked everything that you saw, please like and subscribe to my channel. And if you want to see all of the projects that I built, visit my website www.polishedtimber.com and you'll see everything that I built there. I also have an Instagram at polishedtimber. You can follow me there as well.